The next part of my Voynich manuscript sculpture in this video focuses on the Voynich nymphs. I wanted to briefly explain why this part of the sculpture in particular presents such a dilemma to an artist. So if you think about the natural proportions of a human body and compare that to these drawings, it's clear that these are not drawn in a realistic way. And yet, this artist has not just made figures that are badly drawn, they've made figures that are kind of badly drawn, but in very specific and deliberate ways. And it's very interesting to try to translate that from a two-dimensional form into a three-dimensional sculpture. It's interesting and actually very challenging. So the Voynich nymphs have a very large head. They also have almost no neck. Their neck is often nearly as wide as their torso, and their shoulder also kind of comes out of the side of their neck. They have especially skinny arms, but more exaggerated hips and stomach. They also have a very compressed body proportion in general, other than their head, which is larger than an average person's head should be. It makes it especially difficult to figure out what style I'm going to sculpt. I can't really follow any conventional methods of figure sculpting for these nymphs because they almost have more in common with like a cartoon character than a real human, and that becomes very difficult to translate into 3 dimensions while still capturing the same essence that is in these drawings. So I don't want to sculpt a nymph with correct proportions, because if I did that, I think it would lose its connection to the manuscript. And I think this is just as much, if not more, of a challenge than sculpting a normally proportioned human. So we'll see how it goes. So I'm using a technique to start making the face and the eyes with polymer clay. So this is just a type of clay that's completely different from porcelain. This is just the type of clay that you can bake in your own oven at very low temperatures. And I actually learned a technique from someone who makes miniature polymer clay fairies, and I thought it was a technique that works really well to make the faces of the Voynich nymphs. It's what I used to do the last Voynich nymph sculpture that I made, and that sculpture was actually made entirely of polymer. I don't want to do this one the same way. I want this one to be completely porcelain, but I do like the technique with the polymer clay to make the face. So I'm going to make the face in polymer and then use that as a mold for the porcelain. So I will make like an impression of the face shape and then press a piece of porcelain into that to get a little ready-made nymph face, and then I can put that onto the porcelain body once I make that. And I think this will allow me to make the body without having to worry about squishing the face as I'm working, and vice versa. This technique is something that's designed for making normally proportioned faces, though, so I'm basically sort of adapting it to the Voynich nymph requirements. Polymer clay has to soften up quite a bit before it becomes workable. I've already made these little pieces of polymer clay that are already baked, so whereas this is soft and workable, this is hard. And these are going to be the eyes. the start of the eyes, and it won't actually really become apparent what I'm doing until you start to see it come together more. But I basically want to get an entire eyeball so it actually fills up the whole eye socket. It's not going to be as small as the final eye, but I want it to kind of fill up that entire space. So I'm probably going to go, it looks kind of funny at this point, I'm probably going to go with something around that size. What I like so much about this technique is that I can push the clay down over the eyes, and then I can also scrape it away again, and the eyes, since they're already baked, will stay exactly the same, and I can build all the other features of the face around the eye sockets.